Hey everybody, it's me, Amy, and I'm back with part 3 of Dueling Rabbits Productions' epic series, following a Drawloom project from start to finish. In my previous video, Warping a Drawloom Part 2, we did a lot to bring our fine wool damask scarf closer to reality. We came up with an ingenious way to position the pattern leashes for threading, and we also threaded the ground shafts. We slayed the reed, tied on the warp, and took care of the lamb and treadle tie-ups for a 6-end satin variant. We left the loom looking like this. At the back, the pattern leashes are hanging on their shafts and headling bars, ready to be moved to their final configuration towards the center of the loom. At the front of the loom, our warp is tied on, but the Drawloom's console is pretty much a bare skeleton. In order to finish setting up our Drawloom today, we are going to attach the single drawcords to 22 of our pattern leashes, assemble the Myrehed combination attachment, and set up our leashes on their pattern shafts. Let's look in a little more detail at the end goal before getting down to work. There are 115 pattern leashes on 17 pattern shafts configured as required by my profile draft. Here are my 6 ground shafts. You can see the pattern shafts hanging behind them. There are single unit drawcords attached to 22 leashes in point arrangements at the back of the pack. The pattern shafts will allow me to weave symmetrical designs on these units quickly and efficiently, but the drawcords will give me total freedom of design on these units when I so desire. On the console, you can see the other ends of the drawcords. Here's the beater in case you need to get your bearings. Above that is the hook bar, and above that is the reed that keeps my drawcords in order and spaces them where they need to be in relation to the units they control. The hook bar is placed so that I can secure the raised units while I am treadling my 6 ground shafts. We need to attach the drawcords before we can organize our pattern shafts, so let's prepare those before heading to the loom. Myrehed provide 2 sets of cords with the combination attachment, or with the single unit drawloom for that matter, gray cords and white cords. They come in lengths on spools like these, and must be cut from the spool and have their ends melted before they can be used. The cords are manufactured with loops at either end. On one end is a small loop which ultimately secures the cord to the back of the loom. The cords are pretty long. The other end is a large loop. This is destined to be mounted at the front of the loom on the Drawloom console. The large loop provides enough slack to allow it to reach the hook bar when required. It is very important when installing these cords to check which end is which before making any irreversible decisions. This can be a challenge, particularly if one has enthusiastic helpers. Let's remind ourselves where these things are going to go. Here's the profile showing the setup of my pattern leashes on their shafts. The single drawcords are going to be attached to these 22 units here at the back. And remember that my cords were 2 different colors? This helps differentiate groups of cords at the reed and makes it easier to follow patterns without having to do too much counting. I've decided to use white cords on all my units except these center ones here, which will be connected to gray cords. That will really help me when I'm selecting units because I will have a central reference for my points. 5 white units on the right, the central turning point unit is gray, and the 5 white units on the left. This sequence is repeated in the second group. It will make choosing the correct cords pretty easy when the time comes. The first thing I need to do is prepare my reed for the drawcords. My warp is set at 36 ends per inch. My units have 6 ends each. That means I will have 6 units per inch, and thus 6 single drawcords per inch. I happen to have an old 6 ends per inch reed in my collection, which will work perfectly to space the drawcords where they need to be, with 1 cord per dent. There's quite a bit of leeway here, though, so if I hadn't had this reed, I would have made do with another. I will have empty dents where there are no drawcords and need to figure out where to mark my reed to save confusion when standing at the loom. Here's the center of the reed marked with a Sharpie. I've aligned it with the center of my profile so I don't get confused when I'm counting. If I count left towards where my point is, I count 15 units between the center of the piece and my first unit of interest. I count 15 dents in my reed and mark the 16th with gaily colored yarn. That is the rightmost edge of the point. I count 11 dents to the left and mark that. That will be the point's other side. When I attach the leashes to the single drawcords and then run those through the reed, they should be aligned nicely with the units as they sit on their pattern shafts. I do the same thing for the point on the right. I count 15 dents over and mark the 16th with yarn. I count 11 more and mark that. Since we will be attaching our drawcords from left to right, strictly speaking, we only need the leftmost dents of each point marked. But as you may have noticed by now, I approach drawloom weaving the same way NASA and SpaceX approach manned spaceflight. I leave nothing to chance. Okay. Here's the back of the loom all ready for the process to begin. I approached this task with its relatively few number of drawcords exactly the same way I would if I had hundreds. There's a lot going on, so let's examine the setup. Here are a couple of spare shaft bars from my big standard laid across the top of the extension. The reed I've just marked is hanging from that, directly in front of the pattern leashes. Conveniently to hand, I've hung my drawcords from the side of the loom, as neatly as possible so they don't tangle. Down here on my lazy Kate, I have my short lift heddles ready to go. At either end of the shaft bars, you can see an idle bolt inserted in the extension. These will hold the loops at either end of the drawcords after they've been attached to their leashes. You may recall that I planned ahead and separated out the 2 points destined for single drawcords. They're sitting here calmly on their own heddling bar at the back of the loom. The green yarn on each group marks its center. Note how the leashes line up pretty well with the marks on my reed. I'm going to work from left to right. First, I retrieve a lift heddle thusly. Look how little and cute it is. I select the first leash and feed the heddle through all 6 of its pattern heddles. I need to make sure to get all of them. I loop the lift heddle through itself and pull it snugly. I open up the loop at its top. You can probably already guess how this is going to work. I take up my first white drawcord and establish which end has the short loop and which end the long loop. Got it. The short loop goes over the bolt on the top of the loom, here. I take the end with the long loop and feed it through the lift heddle from left to right. Then I thread the end through the first marked dent in my reed. I go from underneath. It's a little awkward because I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. I then take the long loop and place it over the bolt above my head and to the right. The cord is now suspended between the 2 bolts, attached to its pattern leash and going through the correct dent in the reed. Let's do another one. I pick up my next lift heddle, isolate the next pattern leash, and feed the heddle through. I loop the heddle through itself and snug it up. I choose another white drawcord and place its small loop on the bolt above my head and to the left. I run the other end of the cord through the heddle from left to right and thread it through the next dent in my reed, again taking care to thread upwards from below. The large loop at the end of the drawcord goes to the bolt above and to my right. I repeat this process for my first 5 drawcords, which are now attached to their leashes and going through the reed. I have reached my middle unit, marked with green. This one gets a gray cord for ease of reference later on. I attach that using the same method as the others. I continue with the rest of my cords until all 22 are complete. You can see the large loops are on the bolt to the right. They are now secured together with a choke tie. The cords travel in two groups through the reed and the lift heddles, all the way to the bolt on the left, where the short loops are. They are also secured together with a choke tie. We now take up a board that has been patiently standing by. I retrieve the small loops from their bolt and thread the board through them, making sure not to twist the bundle. For now, I'll lay the board across the extension with a pin through either end to keep it in place. This secures one end of the drawcords to the back of the loom. We now remove the other ends of the cords from their bolt and toss the loops towards the front of the loom. I move to the beater and pick up the loops like so. By turning them this way and that and pulling them taut, you can see what they are doing. They are traveling straight down from the extension through the reed to where I am standing, with not a twist in sight. I take some more pieces that have been standing by, insert them through the large loops, and attach them to the console, thusly. I take the reed down from its hangers and move it to the front of the loom. It also attaches to the console. When I've done that, you can see better how the cords are traveling from the back of the loom to the front via the lift heddles. At this point, I temporarily tie the cords to the countermarch to keep them out of the way while I finagle the pattern shafts. It looks pretty good. I'm pleased with my progress and ready to confront the rest of the setup. Let's take a moment before proceeding with the redistribution of the pattern leashes to their shafts. If you want to learn more about Myrehed drawlooms and how to assemble them, I can think of no finer English language resource than Becky Ashenden's DVD, Dress Your Swedish Drawloom. And check out the latest edition of Joanne Hall's Drawloom Weaving, hot off the presses with additional structures and projects by guest weavers, including yours truly. Both the DVD and the book are available wherever fine weaving products are sold. To prepare the Drawloom's console for the hookups to the pattern shafts, we first have to decide which pull handles and associated cords we are going to use. I have 41 handles permanently installed, but rarely use all of them. I use the pulls toward the center of the console for however many shafts there are. For this project, I'll need 17 shafts and pulls. I've done some math and marked the central 17 with blue tape. There are an equal number of idle handles on either side of the designated group. Since my handles are threaded from left to right, from the front of the drawbridge to the back, I will need to skip several cords at the front of my setup. I loop them over the side of the loom and will ignore them for the rest of this project. So, 17 pattern shafts. You remember from my previous video that all the leashes for the first 4 shafts are already threaded and waiting at the back of the loom. All we need to do is move them forward to their prepared cords. Let's move the first shaft. I lift it off its support and slide it forward on the warp until it reaches the first dangly pull handle cord. I attach it using the little cup hook on the end of the shaft and voila, it's done! I can rest the other end of the shaft on the horizontal bar on the far side of the loom until I've moved the remaining 3 shafts to their respective cords. When that's done, I can scoot round to the other side and secure them so they are level. We now have to distribute all the pattern leashes remaining on the 2 headling bars at the back of the loom. The foremost bar contains 33 leashes, 11 for each of the 3 points not attached to single drawcords. We'll move these onto their pattern shafts first. I'm now standing at the back of the loom, contemplating my 2 headling bars. I've secured the rear bar to the loom uprights to keep it out of the way while I work on the 3 groups of leashes on the bar at the front. I've hung 2 loops of Texel to the extension's crosspiece, so I have a cradle waiting to receive the prepared pattern shafts. You may recall that at threading time, I marked the central unit in each group to save myself having to count now. These central units will be the points of my repeated point threading on 11 pattern shafts. Picking up the first 3 units for their pattern shaft is dead simple. Hello! I just feed the shaft bar through the leashes and pop it onto the waiting hangers. I turn it upside down so the hooks will keep it from sliding out of the loops. Done. The remaining shafts are a little more complicated, but not much. Each additional shaft will have 6 units on it, 1 unit on either side of the points we've just moved, working outwards. Working behind the headling bar now, I carefully select my next 6 units and slide the pattern shaft bar through them. There's the 2 on either side of the leftmost point. There's the 2 on either side of the middle point. Finally, the 2 on either side of the rightmost point. I maneuver the shaft over the headling bar and hang it through the waiting loops behind the first bar. I now have 2 shafts with a total of 9 units separated from the rest. All of these units are spanning both their shafts and the headling bar. We need to free them from the headling bar so the shafts can be moved forwards to their pull cords. To do this, we are going to replace the existing headling bar with a new one, releasing our 9 leashes in the process. I turn the headling bar on its side so I can see what I'm doing. I pull back the units that have not been moved onto pattern shafts. I pull the transferred leashes forward to help with the effort. I slip a spare bar, in this case a long lamb from my extensive collection, through the rear heddles. You can see here that the lamb is going through all the heddles except the ones that have been moved onto shafts. These are hanging freely in front of the rest. So now all I have to do is replace the old headling bar with the new lamb, this bar for this bar. On the right-hand side, I slide the Texsolve loop off the headling bar and slide it onto the lamb. I repeat the process at the other end. When I drop the headling bar and take it away, the pattern shafts and their units are completely free from the rest of the setup. I take the first shaft with its 3 leashes and move it forward to attach it to its waiting dangly drawcords. Then I come back for the second shaft. I now have 6 pattern shafts in their final configuration and am ready to transfer more leashes from the headling bar. Here's a view of the process from the back of the loom. I'm still picking up leashes on either side of the ones that have already been moved and am down to the last 2 shaft bars worth. I pull back the leashes destined for a pattern shaft and insert that shaft through the heddles. I lift the shaft bar over the headling bar and place it in its loops. I typically transfer 2 or 3 shafts worth of leashes at a time. Personally, I find that's quicker than trying to do more all at once. One more pattern shaft to go on this headling bar. Since this is the last group of leashes on the headling bar, I can just rest this shaft on the warp while I remove it. I slide the first shaft bar forward to its waiting cords, and then move this one too. There we go. I've got 10 pattern shafts right where they need to be. Now I can address the other headling bar, which has all the leashes that are attached to single drawcords. Other than having to work around these, the process for moving these units is pretty much the same as the others, although I do find it easier to load and move just one pattern shaft at a time. My middle units are marked in green as before, and there is a lot less in the way of infrastructure clogging up the works now. I work from the front for all of these units because the drawcords don't allow me to load the shafts from the back. There are only 2 points worth of leashes on this bar. I select the central unit from each, place it on the shaft, and slip it into the waiting loops. I identify the leashes that have not yet been moved and slide my lamb through. I replace the headling bar with my lamb and free up my 2 leashes. I slide them forward on their drawcords to join the other pattern shafts. I will do the rest in exactly the same way. When I've finally taken care of my X shaft, I stand back to admire a job well done. We are now nearing the finish line, and I just need to put the final touches on the single unit drawcords. I add some more pieces to the combo attachment and bolt them onto the drawbridge. I untie the drawcords from the countermarch and let them hang freely. I need to tension the drawcords, so I insert 2 boards to route them towards the reed. These boards are attached to the crosspieces I bolted on a few moments ago. When that's done, I like to organize my cords over the bars, making sure they are not twisted and that they travel in a straight line to the bars from the reed. We're looking good. The drawcords are spaced out and in order on their board on top of the extension and travel unmolested through the lift heddles, over the tension boards, through the reed, and to their resting place on the console. But the drawcords need to be tightened up so there is very little slack in them when the leashes are in their neutral position. We do this by making a sandwich back in the extension where the small loops are installed on the bar mounted on the pins on the crosspiece. I place another board on top of the first and start rolling them together, shortening the cords in the process. As I roll them up, the tension on the lift heddles increases until they are extended to where they are almost, but not quite, lifting the leashes off their pattern shafts. When I think they're about right, I pin my sandwich back to the extension. It can be fine-tuned down the road by moving the pins in the holes along the extension. But this looks pretty good for now, and we can move to the console for a few final flourishes. I install the hook bar and make sure the drawcord loops reach it comfortably. I take a spare warping stick, thread it through the loops of the drawcords, and secure it to the reed. This allows me to see the cords more easily and select just one at a time. The setup looks great. Can you believe we're almost ready to weave? The next step is to remove the support pins from the countermarch jacks and start pressing treadles. And if you are a weaver, you know that at that point just about anything can happen. Join me for part 4 to see whether all our hard work has been a success and find out what we can do to perfect our setup. I'll see you soon.